A little birdie told me that you want to get better at public speaking, and you don't know necessarily how to do that. Well, you're in the right place. Today we're going to be talking about rhetoric and diction and how that's going to be able to improve your public speaking. These two topics have a lot of overlap, but being able to utilize them correctly and efficiently is going to be the difference between a stuttering, nervous person at the front of the classroom versus a strong and passionate speaker. So let's learn what the difference is. Rhetoric is the way that you present the words that create analogies that sway the audience to your point of view or sway them against the opposing point of view. Rhetoric is especially powerful if you're able to use the strategies correctly and if you're able to format it in a way that is understandable and actually makes sense. We don't want to be throwing out analogies for no reason, right? We want to make sure that each of them has a specific impact, a point of view that you're trying to get across. Because if you just say a bunch of random stuff, it's not going to be comprehensible, right? On the other hand, diction, and just to be clear, these two do not have a defined line between them that makes them different. Diction is probably going to be the most important part of your speech. Each word has a connotation in the mind of the audience or the mind of the listener that is immediately perceived. And you want to make sure that connotation, that perception lines up with the intention that you have when you brought those words to the table. Diction in a literary piece and a written piece is going to be the most important part of your essay. And the reason why is because if you say something like John had a good day versus John had a pleasant day, good and pleasant mean almost exactly the same thing, except good, it seems a little bit lazy. Pleasant, it makes you feel comfortable. It makes you feel lighthearted. Any worry throughout the day is immediately quenched by the moment that you hear the word pleasant or if you hear something that is pleasant, right? So that's the importance of diction. Making sure you're using strong words that align with the path that you're going to be taking. And if you're able to use them at the same time effectively, it can drastically improve your public speaking ability and the way that you get your point across. Now, I mentioned these rhetorical strategies earlier, but what exactly are they? You might have heard this before, ethos, logos, and pathos. And it's important that you know what each of them does so that you can utilize them efficiently and effectively throughout your essay or throughout your speech, for example. Ethos is how you present yourself and how you make sure the audience doesn't see you as just a guy that came off the street to give this essay or a guy that came off the street that is telling you about what you should do, what you should not do. And the main part of ethos is that you're able to show your character in its entirety or a specific part of your character to make the audience actually connect with you and understand what you're saying. Logos, on the other hand, is how the audience will understand the information you're getting. Rather than having them connect with you, you want them to connect with the things that you're saying. If they're completely illogical and based on unfounded beliefs, then a very, very, very small percent of that audience is actually going to understand or listen to you. So making sure that your facts are right and they actually make sense in the context that you use them is just as important as making sure that they understand who you are. Pathos is another way that they can connect with you. Are you able to convey emotion that they understand or they can perceive? Pathos is something that is a little bit more stretchy than the other two. Because when you say pathos, you can use anecdotes, you can use specific examples that trigger emotional or inflamed types of belief or thought. If you're saying something that is supposed to be highly motivational, pathos is necessary that you have in your special presentation. Pathos allows you to kind of embrace or put out a bubble that the audience can walk into and experience what you're saying for themselves. If you use pathos and it's not empowering for as you read it yourself, it is not being utilized correctly. Now, I might seem like someone that's extremely angry and coming at you from the screen. But this is the picture that you see in front of the screen. That is not who you're supposed to be. Someone that just angrily yells at you and tries to get their point across by just speaking louder than the other person. throughout these persuasive conversations or persuasive speeches, you want to seem calm and collected. And utilizing these rhetorical strategies correctly, the ones that are on the screen, utilizing those correctly is especially important if you want to master the form of rhetoric. And this is going to take practice and practice and practice as you write and write and write. But if you can master these rhetorical strategies among others, you can start to resemble speakers like Martin Luther King, Mark Antony, Frederick Douglass, Abraham Lincoln, and even people like Morgan Freeman, for example. But integrating it into your speech, the way that you do that, if you read your speech and you can't recognize that this is happening or the effects that you intend are being actually like put into use, then you're probably going to have to restart, right? And these are some questions, or these are just some things that you have to keep in mind when you're doing this to make sure that it is effective, the best that it can be. If you're not convinced by your own point of view, the audience is certainly not going to either. So at least convince yourself before you can go and convince others. The other thing, the way that you use it is also extremely important, not just putting it out there, right? And this should make sense, right? You can't just expect like oil to go into your car seat and make the car run, right? So if the placement of your rhetoric does not make sense, then you do not make sense. And then the last thing, try and find other ways to write the same exact message, because you don't know, some ways might be better to fit to the context of your speech or to fit the meaning of your speech than others. And if you get stuck in like a pigeonholed mindset, like, oh yeah, the first one is always going to be best, that is not going to be conducive to better writing habits or better speaking habits throughout the future. Now, in terms of diction, I kind of talked about how the connotation of the word matters, right? But making sure that if you're trying to make a point, like get it across this gap between understanding from you to the understanding of the audience, you have to make sure that it is powerful. A way you can do this is by using polarizing language. And what that means is that the connotation of one word completely like stands alone from the other word. It's kind of like a juxtaposition of sorts. But again, you have to make sure that these make sense, like these analogies, that these types of this type of device makes sense throughout your writing. You don't want to just like throw out random jumbled stuff, right? And you also want to be subtle in that delivery. You don't want to make it seem like you intended there to be like this diction change, right? Because then it's like the difference of watching something scripted and it feels scripted, and like watching something scripted but it's like seamless integration, right? But that doesn't mean you have to lessen the intensity as you speak or lessen the intensity of the language. You just have to make it it just has to be right for it to get across. And I know this isn't something that you're going to be doing pretty often, right? I don't assume many of you are politicians or many of you are avidly just going at it with people in the lunchroom, right? But trying to practice this over time can improve how you speak, how you present yourself, and that is extremely important as you go into like the career field and just going into the professional development field, because doing that, being able to present yourself effectively, being able to make sure people have a good impression of you is one of the most important skills that you can have to an employer. And then other tips regarding this, using like excessively long words that are like flowy, right? It might fit in a certain way or a certain time, but you should not be doing that all the time, right? So long words are not better if you're using them all the time, right? A way that you can change this, and I'm going to be bringing this up in the future videos, a way that can help is that when you're writing, all the sentences should be different sounding. Let's say you start off by saying like a dependent clause, like while I did this, right? You don't use a dependent clause all the time because it's like while I did this, before he did that. But even when, like, that just sounds kind of distracting. It just seems kind of like sloppy, right? But being able to use like that while and then coming back immediately with a direct sentence, like a simple sentence, like while he did this, blah blah blah, and then you start off with a different point, like the fire was raging. Probably not that, but you get what I'm saying. You don't want to make all your sentences seem the same. So varying the length of the sentence, varying the words, like the length of the words, is going to be crucial throughout your writing experience. And you want to make sure that the words that you're using are deliberately placed, because just putting them everywhere, I've talked about this a lot, and I realize I'm sounding really redundant, which I will not do. And again, while you're speaking, you have to make sure that you're smiling, or throughout your writing, right? If you're making sure that you want to get a point across, you want to write in a way that not only inspires a belief throughout your audience or throughout the listener or the reader, you want to write in a way that can actually like stick. If someone just remembers what you wrote later that day, you want to make it invoke a smile. Like, you're smiling, they're smiling, everyone is smiling. If all the world is smiling, either there's a corrupt leader or everyone's happy. And just, especially if you're speaking, right? If you're able to just get that smile or like a quick thumbs up or something like that, it just lightens the mood. And people are going to be more amicable or more friendly to what you're saying. With that being said, that concludes our first lesson on rhetoric and diction. And our second lesson will be coming very, very soon. So stay tuned. See you.